Let's get more on our top story now, the continuing Israeli operation against Hamas and Gaza. Dore Gold is a senior foreign policy advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister and joins us now live from Jerusalem. Good to have you on the programme. I know that Benjamin Netanyahu has been in talks with world leaders over this, including Angela Merkel, John Kerry, Ban Ki-moon. What are they telling you?
Well, again, I'm not going to disclose private diplomatic conversations, but I think there's a broad understanding in the international community that Israel is acting out of self-defense, that it is Hamas that initiated these deep strikes into Israeli territory with the rocket forces, much of which is based on Iranian-supplied weaponry and weaponry from a few other sources. And therefore, I believe that we have strong international support to do what's necessary to defend our cities and our civilians from these Hamas rocket attacks.
Okay, but you're well aware that the longer this operation goes on, the more international condemnation it will receive. It's already drawn criticism for killing civilians, including 14 children. As those civilian deaths rise, it's going to become harder to justify Israel's position, isn't it?
Well, you have to understand that the struggle between Israel and Hamas today is based on two very different strategies. It is Hamas that is trying to wed its military capabilities, its rocket forces, with its civilian population. It's trying to put the rockets next to mosques, next to schools, putting the supply lines for the rockets within private homes, so that Israel will say, there's nothing we can do. They can fire at us with impunity. And it is Israel which is saying, no, what we demand is to separate the civilian presence from the military capacity of Hamas. And we do that by dedicating enormous resources to Arabic-speaking intelligence officers who call private homes, who send text messages to people who we know have in their homes military equipment, which makes them a legitimate military target.
Yeah, but mistakes
it's very
happen.
rare, it's very difficult, it's very slow,
happen,
but that is what we have
mistakes.
to do.
Today, we had a 2-year-old child who was killed. Today, we had a reporter in a car, clearly marked TV, who was blown up. We had a beachside cafe where people were sitting watching the World Cup, which was blown up. What I'm asking you is, what is the end objective of Operation Protective Edge? I mean, is it just to stop rocket fire, or is the policy actually to fundamentally change the reality on the ground in Gaza?
Well, first of all, let me just finish this one point, which is very central. It is a terrible tragedy if any innocent people are killed. But the responsible power, the person, the organization that is responsible for those civilian losses is Hamas, because Hamas is putting its rockets within civilian areas. Israel's doing what it can to avoid this problem. But you know something? Go to the war in Afghanistan, go to the war in Iraq, go to every single struggle. I am sure if we had a real picture of what was going on in Yemen with the war between the Yemeni government and the Houthis, we'd find very similar features.
Okay, but the difference with Hamas
have done more than any other country to minimize civilian losses.
Hamas is trapped in a tiny strip of land which is one of the most densely populated areas on the face of this earth. 1.8 million people crammed into a tiny space. It's not the same as if Afghanistan or Iraq.
It is absolutely the same, because there are empty areas within that very densely populated area where military equipment, where military training and camps could be placed. But Hamas intentionally puts everything into densely populated areas, which creates an objective problem. Now, we have two choices. We could be like, the Western powers who used to napalm whole areas when they had counterinsurgency war. We won't do that. Or we could just give up and say, no, there's nothing we can do. Let the rockets fall, because we can't stop the rockets. We are separating the civilian population to the best of our ability from this military capability, and we will destroy the Hamas military capability.
But this was exactly the objective of Operation Cast Lead back in 2008, 2009. And yet that, which resulted in over 1,000 Palestinian deaths, did nothing to diminish Hamas's capacity to fire rockets. So surely a different approach, a diplomatic approach, would be preferable.
Well, much depends Well, a diplomatic approach with Hamas. Who should we listen to in Hamas? You know, you have
well, excuse me, they're part of the unity government
Israel.
now.
You have the Hamas charter that calls for destroying Israel. Yes, but what happened? You know, some people might have thought that if you make a unity government between Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas, Hamas will become more moderate. Hamas will accept the quartet parameters for diplomatic engagement with Israel. But the opposite happened. Hamas became more radical. Its operatives in the West Bank kidnapped and brutally killed 3 Israeli teenagers. And then, at the same time, its rocket formations began launching rockets into the heart of Israeli towns, villages, and cities. Indiscriminate shooting, and therefore we have the situation we have today. In many respects, the unity agreement with Mahmoud Abbas created a more radicalized Hamas, because Hamas understood that maybe the international community didn't care about its violent nature.
Very quickly, because we are running out of time, but I want to know, where does this end? What is Israel's exit strategy? Under what terms is it going to accept a ceasefire?
Well, first and foremost, the rocket launches against Israeli civilians must come to an end. No country could accept this. I mean, could you imagine if out of Yemen they were firing to Saudi Arabia, threatening the holy cities of Mecca and Medina with rockets? We've had Hamas rockets fired at Jerusalem. Where's the respect for any kind of faith? There is none. So what we expect is all this rocket fire to end. And number 2, we're not going to allow ourselves to be in a position where 3 months from now, Hamas, because it has some grievance, will start firing rockets again. And more Iranian weapons boats will come into the Mediterranean with equipment for Hamas. This is not going to recur.
Dore Gold, Senior Foreign Policy Advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, a landslide brought on by typhoon near Guri has killed a 12-year-old boy in central Japan. Closed-circuit cameras caught the moment the river burst, sending a torrent of mud and rocks down the mountain and into the farming